Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, in this House today. Ladies and gentlemen, on the side of the government today, we believe that companies have the right to actively choose to select who they want to represent, who they want to hire, so and represent their products and maximize their profits. And so that is why today we are very proud to propose the motion that will allow companies to refuse to hire smokers. And we are very proud to propose this motion today. So before I move on with my debate, I'd like to give you a brief definition of what today's case is. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to set this House in liberal democratic countries that are not yet allowing the refusal of hiring certain smokers or certain categories. And we are going to allow this in industries where the image of the product is extremely important, such as like prep schools or childcare industries, education, and so on. And we want to stress that this isn't a blanket ban. We're not going to make companies force them to refuse every single smoker that comes to their doors. So that is our definition today. Now I'd like to move on to our points. Today we have 2 points. Our first point is about how companies have the right to hire whoever they want. And our second point is why uniquely smokers. So before that, yes, sir.
If you say the smoking itself is not so important for individuals, why don't you just ban all smoking itself?
No, we want to say that we are going to refuse to hire smokers if the company choose so. No, thank you. And if people want to stop smoking, we are more than happy for them to stop smoking. So now we'd like to move on to our first point, which is about how companies have rights to decide who to hire. Ladies and gentlemen, a company is a certain body that makes profit. And how do they make this profit? Well, they make this profit by hiring or selecting people that can maximize the profits for the companies. They select people with certain traits, certain abilities that can make profit for them. And why is this profit extremely important? We say that profit is extremely important because it's what moves the economy. With profit, it impacts a lot of people, paying from the lowest workers to the highest people. They provide products to other people. They use this money to make trades with other countries and so on. So we say that at the profit is extremely important. And at the heart of this profit are the ones who make it. They are the workers. So without the workers, without these people who have the traits, the qualities that can be used to maximize this profit, we won't be able to have any profit. And as a result, the economy won't go around and benefit a lot of people. So that is why, in order to do the job that is destined for them, companies must select people. They must select competent people, people with abilities, people who fit the certain image that the company wants to produce. And we say that in cases where having smokers may have an undesirable effect on the outcome of the profit, in which the profit is directly related to the image that the company has, then we say that it is fair to respect the desires of the company, to respect the company's rights. For example, let's say there's a company that produces diapers and children's care, baby food, and so on. What if every single member of that company was smoking, endangering the health of others? We say that that's an extremely negative effect on the company itself, and people may not want to buy products from that company because they feel that that company is a hypocrite by producing products that are related to health and babies and so on, but on the other side, smoking and endangering health and producing secondhand smoke and so on. So we say that in cases where the profit is directly related to the image, that these two are really close, we say that in these cases the company has rights to decide who to hire. So moving on to my second point, which is about why uniquely smokers. Ladies and gentlemen, on the government side, we say that discrimination based on religion or race is extremely horrible. We disagree with it totally. And why is that? That's because you can't choose which religion you belong to or which race you belong to. You are born into it. So that is why this is something that can't be changed. However, in the case of smoking, you are free to decide when to start smoking. You are free to decide when to stop smoking. No, thank you. You smoke because of your own free will. And we say that in these cases, it's very different from religion and race. Yes, sir.
You really believe it's so easy for people to opt out smoking, even if they have been so addicted with that pastime?
Yes, we can. If you have the will to want to stop smoking, if you want to stop smoking, then it might be a lot of work, it might take a lot of time, it might take a lot of money, but we believe that it is something possible. And in this case, if a certain individual wants to go into a company like the diaper company or prep school companies, and if they have, if that company refuses to hire smokers, then that individual has the choice to either stop smoking and enter that company, or continue to smoke and go into another industry. We believe that this choice is going to be maintained under our paradigm. So what is going to happen after plant? No, thank you. We say that if we allow companies to refuse to hire smokers, then two benefits can be seen. The first benefit is about how we can maintain company profits by maintaining the image that the company has worked so hard to create. For example, if the consumers see that the company is true to their word, that they really want to encourage healthy lifestyles and healthy care and so on, they'll buy into their products, they'll buy into their marketing, they'll buy their products, and as a result increase their profits and so on. So we believe that this is going to be beneficial for all the companies, its workers, and so on. And the second benefit we want to express is how the companies wouldn't have to pay premier insurance based on their workers, because companies, if they hire smokers, then they have to pay a lot of insurance money, so in case that because smokers have a higher risk of developing lung cancer, emphysema, other health-related diseases, as opposed to someone who does not smoke. And for this difference, these companies have to pay out millions and millions of money, which could be saved if they didn't have to hire smokers. And we believe that saving money is going to be beneficial for every single company, so we want to give them this benefit. So what I've told you in my speech today is that we believe that companies have the right to select their employees. They have the right to select who will be best, who will make the most profit for their companies. And we believe that smokers are distinctly different from religion, race, and so on. So that is why we can allow companies the choice to refuse to hire these smokers. And for all these reasons, we are very proud to post today. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, we believe that companies should never be able to discriminate workers on the basis of what kind of lifestyle they have, because we believe that lifestyle is extremely important in what kind of life you can have, or how much happiness you can have throughout your life. We think this is extremely damaging, especially when smoking is an irrelevant criteria for the company, and that is why we are very proud to oppose. I'm going to talk about three things in my speech. First of all, I'm going to talk about how companies do not have the right to use this criteria. Second of all, I'm going to talk about the importance of private life and lifestyle. Third of all, I'm going to talk about how there are going to be enormous harms to the individuals. But before moving into my points, let me rebut to the previous speaker. First of all, the previous speaker talked about the profit of the company and how image is a valid criteria. We believe this is not true, because image is a very vague criteria, first of all, right? That is why we think that depending on what kind of lifestyle you have, you can never discriminate these people. These images is very vague depending on that person. It's not an absolute harm. That is why we cannot discriminate people or not hire people just because they are black, right? Sure, there might be customers who might not like a black person coming to your neighbor and selling their products, but you cannot evade this on these people because it is not an absolute damage. But moreover, we see that this can be prevented in several ways, because we don't see the strong link between an image and smoking, right? Because, say, they brought up an example of diapers, right? Just because the person who sells diapers to you smokes doesn't affect how much diapers you're going to buy. Number one, because people don't really care about that, right? People care about how good the product is in the first place. But number two, it's just that those people shouldn't smoke in front of this person when they're selling that thing, right? We think this can be prevented and this harm is not absolute. No, thank you. Number three, they talked about this inborn factor, right? We think this is not the reality, because just because we think that companies actually choose or set criteria not based on this criteria if or if not that person was inborn in that criteria, but actually it's much more. We believe that people, number one, we think that religion, first of all, you can opt out of religion, right? But because they keep it as an invalid criteria, because religion is extremely important, it affects the lifestyle you have, and we think because lifestyle choice is important, you cannot make this criteria. There's all they talked about insurance money. We think any type of choice has potential health damage. You always subsidize people, even if they eat fat food and become these diseases in the future. And we think potential damage can always be there for every type of choice. Let me go into my points. First of all, how companies have no rights. We think companies have no rights, number one, because smoking is irrelevant to the company's profits, right? We believe, as I have already briefly told you, just because a person smokes doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to always damage the image, or moreover, the damage is not absolute, right? The effects of smoking can differ based on people, meaning that not every person is going to get cancer, not every person is going to have a very short lifespan, and we think this can differ based on the person. But number two, the harm is not so immediate, or the harm is not so big, as I have already told you, and it can be evaded in various other ways. What we need to recognize here is that there's potential damage in every type of choice or every type of lifestyle a person has. For example, if you eat unhealthy food, you would become very fat, and you might have a very short lifestyle. Or even if you drink alcohol, that might raise the potential of you getting a harmful disease. Even if you climb mountains, that raises the possibility of you falling off that mountain and die compared to other people. Or even if you drive, that's going to raise the possibility of you to die in a car accident, right? We believe that all types of lifestyles have potential damage, and when we cannot see how smoking is exceptionally damaging to the company, we believe it should never be a criteria. Moreover, number two, because individuals only have an obligation to follow the rules of a company only within that working time, right? The company, no thank you, forces people to sacrifice certain types of choices within a working area because they pay for that, but they do not have the right to intervene into their private lives, etc. Right? You would have to use a certain type of words or what to wear in a company because they pay for it, but they're never intervening in what kind of food you eat or what kind of clothes you wear in private life. We believe that that is why these people do not have a right, even if there's a potential harm to the company, right? Because they don't cut you off just based on religion. Like if you are a certain Muslim person, then you might not be able to wear this campaign girl outfit, or you might not be able to contribute in testing of eating meat, etc. But they do not cut you off just because of that, because they do not have an overriding right to intervene into private life. Which goes into my second point, the importance of private life. We think what kind of lifestyle you have is extremely important because it's going to affect what kind of choices you can make or what kind of stress-releasing methods you can use or what type of happiness you can pursue within the private sphere. We believe that is why what you do in private life must never be controlled by the government by the company, because what type of private life you pursue is going to construct your identity, is going to construct how much happiness you can pursue within a life, etc. And we believe that is why when these companies do not have an overriding right to intervene into private life, it's an invalid criteria. Number three, the harm to individual. This is extremely important, right? There are going to be various people who are going to be affected by this motion. Number one, the people who cannot smoke anymore, and just for the sake of working. These people no longer can pursue stress relief methods through smoking, or they cannot construct their identity on the basis of smoking. And we think this is extremely harmful because the degree of how much happiness they can pursue within a life is going to it's going to decrease extremely. But secondly, the people who cannot work anymore, right? The people who can't choose to opt out of smoking. There's going to be a significant income loss for these people, meaning that they're not going to be able to buy products as much as possible as before, or they're not going to choose the type of education they're going to be providing to their children. We think this is extremely damaging, and we think the ability to get a specific job is extremely important. It's not that any type of job would do as good as anything in these people. We think the type of job you can have is extremely important in terms of identity, etc. And because this is a valid lifestyle choice that government allows in society, we believe this should never be a criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm going to talk about three things in my speech. First, I'm going to directly engage with the case, and secondly, I'm going to further talk about to what extent companies should be allowed to exercise their freedom when it comes to choosing employees. And thirdly, I'm going to further talk about the impacts of a model to those companies. So first of all, let me engage with what the previous speaker said. The legal proposition, first of all, in her first argument, talks about how the company does not have the right to refuse hiring smokers. And based upon the fact that not all smokers are going to impose significant harm on the part of the company, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, first of all, we accept that in not all cases, for not all smokers, there will be massive harm. We think that companies should be allowed to adjudicate whether or not the harm is big or not, Mr. Speaker. And based upon that, companies should be allowed to use these smoking as a criteria or not, Mr. Speaker. Why? Because, Mr. Speaker, first of all, as my friend told you clearly, this strongly, when the company thinks it strongly affects the profit of them, Mr. Speaker, then they should be allowed to exercise this choice. But secondly, more importantly, Mr. Speaker, the company is the best decision maker, is best place to make decision whether or not they use this smoking as a criteria, Mr. Speaker, because companies offer free cigarettes, right? And therefore, if they do not think that there's tangible relationship between smoking and their profit-making process, Mr. Speaker, they do not use this as a criteria because they offer free cigarettes, and therefore, if they if they rather think that they do not want to meet talent to smoke, they do not use this as a criteria, right? And therefore, companies do not have any incentive to abuse or overly use this, Mr. Speaker, and therefore, company can adjudicate very rationally, Mr. Speaker, reasonably, and that is why they should be allowed to make decisions. But secondly, when it comes to fast food or alcohol, other examples, first of all, that's another debate. But secondly, more importantly, Mr. Speaker, if the company thinks those other lifestyle choices have damage upon their profit, we are also happy for the company to use this as a criteria, Mr. Speaker. It is not a burden to oppose other lifestyle choices, right? And that is why, Mr. Speaker, for those two reasons, their first argument doesn't stand. I'm going to incorporate my rebuttal to the second argument into my substantive. But thirdly, she talks about how there will be practical harm to smokers and the alcohol. So, one, Mr. Speaker, we don't think that all, as my friend clarified, we are not blanketly enforcing companies to refuse hiring smokers, and therefore there will be a reasonable, maybe not large, but reasonable number of companies will still, Mr. Speaker, continue to hire smokers and alcohol, and therefore we don't think smokers have to quit smoking immediately in all circumstances. But secondly, even if we accept smokers will have difficulty in terms of continuing their habit, we think that is fine, Mr. Speaker, because smokers can rationally compare the benefits of smoking and the benefits of quit smoking, Mr. Speaker, and therefore as a consequence, if they do not want to lose the income or lose the prospect when it comes to and having jobs, Mr. Speaker, they can replace smoking with other alternative ways to reduce the stress. It might be difficult, but they will gradually shift to other ways of reducing stress, and that's why we don't think there will be harm. So having said that, I'm going to move on to my first elaboration of my argument, Mr. Speaker, which is about to what extent companies should be allowed to exercise their freedom, Mr. Speaker. Now, we tell you two clear reasons why the companies should be given much right to choose their employees. First of all, as my partner said, it affects the profit, Mr. Speaker. The company is providing profits to the employees in terms of salary, and therefore the many people are connected to the profits of companies, right? If the profit of a company declines, families of those employees, Mr. Speaker, employees themselves will be affected. They might, for example, lose livelihood, Mr. Speaker, and therefore the company profit is extremely important, therefore they should be allowed to exercise their choice. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the company has so much burden when it comes to the employee, Mr. Speaker. They have to educate the employees, they have to send them to, for example, study abroad, etc., and therefore they should be allowed to decide what kind of employee they're going to hire because of this huge burden which is put on their shoulders, Mr. Speaker. Now, based upon this, we tell you smoking is listening criteria. The legal proposition said, Mr. Speaker, how the religion is also not the immutable characteristics, and that is why the religion, but Mr. Speaker, we think in terms of religion, it is not entirely, but virtually impossible to change, right? Because obviously, we are baptized at a very early age, for example, 3 or 4 years old, and Mr. Speaker, by their parents, and therefore it is impossible to change because, before you come to awareness, you are, Mr. Speaker, attached to the religion, Mr. Speaker. Now, I'm going to give you 3 examples as to how, Mr. Speaker, the lifestyle is a listening criteria for the company. First one, Mr. Speaker, the legal proposition, asserted that, there's a distinction between private sphere and public sphere, and therefore the private sphere should not be intervened by the company. That is not true, Mr. Speaker. For example, if certain employees, Mr. Speaker, sleep longer than other people, they only go to the company at noon and they do not come to the company at morning, Mr. Speaker, then the company should be allowed to, refuse to hire those people, right, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, the lifestyle, so the criteria is not about the private or public, but the criteria should be about whether there's a relationship between the lifestyle choice and the company profit. But secondly, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the law, for example, in the United States, Mr. Speaker, it clearly stipulates that race and ethnicity cannot be the criteria, Mr. Speaker, and also things like age, because age is not recognized as disability in the United States. But, Mr. Speaker, there's no law which says, Mr. Speaker, lifestyle choice cannot be the criteria of company, right? And therefore, clearly, we see in this example that actually lifestyle choice is the criteria. But thirdly, much more important, Mr. Speaker, in Japan, where we already allow this kind of thing, Mr. Speaker, Toshin High School is actually refusing to hire smokers already on the status quo, Mr. Speaker, and then we clearly show that lifestyle choice is something which is valid for the company to choose, Mr. Speaker. Speaker. Now, lastly, I'm going to enhance the argument. Before that, I'm going to take any point if you have any. Okay, so let me continue with my speech. So, Mr. Speaker, my partner talked about the image, Mr. Speaker. Now, they told us it is vague, but that is not true, Mr. Speaker. Reputation is extremely important, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to the company which are making profit products for children, Mr. Speaker, now it is extremely important because this is your child, right? Parents, Mr. Speaker, when they have many options when it comes to to where they buy diapers or other products for their children, Mr. Speaker, because it is their children, Mr. Speaker. It is hard to differentiate company, Mr. Speaker. Many of those competitors, Mr. Speaker. Reputation can be the key in those instances, right? And therefore, reputation is extremely important. Given the fact in many countries we are raising the smoking tax, and also we are banning, for example, public smoking, smoking in public places in Europe, Mr. Speaker. We see that majority of public are against smoking, and therefore reputation can be the criteria, Mr. Speaker, because it affects their profits. But secondly, Mr. Speaker, we tell you the healthcare costs, right? In countries like the United States, Mr. Speaker, the healthcare costs, if the smokers get lung cancer, right, they have to hospitalize for a very long time, Mr. Speaker. Companies have to pay so much amount of money for those people, Mr. Speaker, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, within company lose a huge amount of revenue in the state, Mr. Speaker. There is loss of their profit, right? There is loss of their salary, loss of employment on the part of those company employees, Mr. Speaker. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, we think healthcare is also extremely important. Lastly, we tell you about the effect to other people, Mr. Speaker, because you have to recognize the harm of second smoke, right? The division between smokers and non-smokers always not possible, Mr. Speaker, because when you have smoking colleagues, especially smoking seniors, it is impossible for you to reject being with those people, right? In terms of company conferences or dinner drink after company work, right? And therefore, Mr. Speaker, large number of non-smokers are also attached to the harm of second smoke. As a consequence, Mr. Speaker, companies have to lose their talents because they have to get so much harm from smoking of other people, Mr. Speaker. They have to die earlier, etc., right? And therefore, all those circumstances, companies are harmed in those three ways: image, Mr. Speaker, healthcare costs, and effect to non-smokers. And the other also, the effect is going to be pretty simple, right? Because companies do not have to pay for healthcare costs, companies do not have to get harmed, do not have to lose customers because of the bad image, and thirdly, companies do not have to lose non-smoking talents because the non-smokers will not be harmed, and that also by the smoking of their colleagues or seniors, Mr. Speaker. For those three comprehensive ways, we are going to help companies to make profits more, Mr. Speaker. That is extremely important. For those comprehensive reasons, we are extremely profitable.
Right. I thank the speaker for the remarks. Before close the open house today, I thought
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very happy to stand here as a representative of the smoker. So, Mr. Speaker, the smoker is not a disability or so forth. We love smoker, as same as the loving the goat, or maybe loving the other person, or maybe the loving the girlfriend, or so forth, Mr. Speaker. In these kinds of criteria, I have the right to loving the smoking forever. So therefore, we say to protect these kinds of inherent, very important choice, we are very proud to stand here to oppose the government side. So I have three issues to talk about by the comprehensively understand the failure coming from the opening government side. So firstly, I want to talking about how the company has the right to intervene lifestyle or not. And secondly, about in which criteria the company can discriminate the people or the cannot discriminate the people. And thirdly, about the smoking, how the effect to the company's profit or not. This is a very comprehensive criteria. So firstly, about the lifestyle. So Mr. Speaker, the government says just ignore my partner's very, very important point. My partner already told you that how the contract between the company and employee has the only effect on their work time. Even in house, what they are doing is too irrelevant to the company's also because the company just paying money for their working time, Mr. Speaker. In these kinds of things, totally ignored by the Mr. Tominaga. No, thank you. And secondly, about the overstretch. So this is the only engagement coming from the Tominaga about these kinds of working time and private life issue. But the thing is, if you overstretch, you are in working time. So therefore, it is totally irrelevant. But in terms of the smoking, just smoking in house, it is totally out of working time. So therefore, we say this logic already stands. And moreover, we say another example. Like if the company require people to move to Akita or so forth, if people living in Tokyo, and for the company profit, if the company demands the people going to the Akita, people have the right to refuse these kinds of requests coming from the company. If their maybe grandmother or grandfather or maybe the disabled children exist, and in Akita they cannot receive proper medical treatment or so forth. Actually, because of the private reason, they have the right to refuse these kinds of things, Mr. Speaker. So therefore, we say even if there is the effect to the profit exist, the individual has the right to deny these kinds of companies' requests, Mr. Speaker. So these examples show you how the private right is important for the citizen, important for employees, and why the company cannot intervene to such kinds of things. So, Mr. Speaker, do you have any comments? Yes, closing.
You guys are saying that tobacco is a choice. It's a legitimate lifestyle choice. But your second off says there's a strong addiction. Are you saying that these people are really choosing to smoke tobacco?
Okay, I will engage this point. I will engage with this point. In second criteria, in which criteria or so forth. So the government side agree the religion, HIV, or race is out of criteria to discriminate or refuse other persons because it can be a discrimination. But the thing is, the tobacco is also same things. Our side happy to say by addict tobacco they can receive the happiness as same as the religion or so forth. The fundamental thing is that to become certain religion is also constructed by the environment which you born or family situation or sometimes the other things. And smoking is also same. Maybe under the current situation they are addicting, but the start is same as the religion or so forth. The friend or maybe your family or home situation or environment create you as a smoker. And the important fact is, as same as the religion, the smoker is also enjoying the such kind of smoking benefit, Mr. Speaker, as same as the loving God benefit or so, Mr. Speaker. So in these kinds of criteria, actually as long as it is important for individual, the company do not have any right to deny these kinds of certain characteristics, Mr. Speaker. And moreover we say, as Mr. Tominaga conceded about the HIV. HIV is also can be their responsibility because if they carefully sex with other persons, there is no possibility to infect the HIV or so. So therefore we say they also admit the involvedness cannot be a reason to diffuse these kinds of things, Mr. Speaker. So therefore we say fundamentally there is no difference between the religion or HIV between and the tobacco because they also enjoy and it is also very important for them, Mr. Speaker. No, thank you. Yeah, okay.
Oh, thank you very much. Like, I told you how the religion is not like something they can change because they're baptized at a very early age. If you can implant these values, but smokers start to smoke when they have a choice after they become adults, right?
It is just a function. There is a many person who choosing another religion in the adult age or so forth. Maybe some Christianity person going to the Muslims or so forth. So therefore we say such kind of unchangeable or so forth is totally out of this debate. Anyway, thirdly, about the smoking as lifestyle or smoking as choice, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, why is the government allowing smoking as a first place? Because the government recognizes that smoking is very, very important for you. The smoking makes you happy. Smoking has the enjoyment also. So therefore we say fundamentally the government allowing smoking under the current situation. In these kinds of criteria, actually the government recognizes the free choice in the private right. Because only person who know about your happiness is you. So therefore we say the government try to maximize choice of the citizen, Mr. Speaker. In these kinds of things, actually the smoking is totally important for the citizen. Also the government admits and also the outside strongly believe, Mr. Speaker. And by taking these kinds of very important criteria and if refusing the such kinds of smoker is totally bad because you just denying the certain person's rights and we say that is unjust. Finally, about is it relevant to the company's profit or not? So it is totally vague analysis. Firstly, about the health insurance, we already cut this thing because another lifestyle choice is also infringing these kinds of companies' insurance or so forth. Why don't you ban other things or why don't you ban all things? And Mr. Tominaga finally said, we can okay to ban another lifestyle or so forth. So even if you doing something bad, you are not the slave of the company, Mr. Speaker. So therefore we say that Mr. Tominaga's very paternalistic idea is totally out of things. And moreover we say, image, there is no link between why the customer has the access to know about the smoker's information or so forth. even they do not smoking in front of the customer, why they can know about these kinds of things? There is a knowledge. So therefore we say we are very proud to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, all choices have the consequence, Mr. Speaker. So that side of the House innocently characterized the smokers' decision-making is legitimate, but they are ignoring that consequence that smokers have to face, Mr. Speaker. As long as they have chosen the one privilege, one type of happiness, they cannot choose another type of happiness. If the company decided that this criteria is relevant to maximize their own profit, it's relevant to conduct their own responsibility towards their co-workers, towards the people who are holding as the legitimate people who they should be cared. So that's why we are proud to propose this motion. So as an extension, I'd like to talk about why smoking is a choice and seeking more happiness beyond their choice is invalid. But before that, I have two rebuttals towards that side of the House. First of all, they told us this smoking and profit is unrelated. But I have two responses. First of all, about the image that was mainly talked about opening government. So if you look at the case like publishment company, the only smoking man is selling the children magazines such as Hiyoko Club and so on. So this kind of customer, main customer is the parents, right? The parents are caring about the health condition of the children, and if the smoking provides bad image towards the main customer, that leads to significant decreasement of the income or profit that the company can gain. This is the crucial harm by creating a bad image. No. Secondly, about investment. So if the smokers if the smokers retire earlier because of their bad health condition, so even if the company provides the same amount of investment towards the non-smokers and smokers, companies lose the profit if they invest towards the smoker. This is totally harmful situation. Even though you provided the same amount of money towards the people, but if you just because these people is smoking, these people are selfishly making decisions that is harming the company's profit, the company can get the huge damage. This is totally related to the profit. Second rebuttal. Their side of the House just talk about the smoking as a private factor. We should not concern about that. I have two responses. First, it's about sometimes it is relevant. I clearly proved to you in my first rebuttal. Secondly, about we believe this kind of the smoking is a choice. I admit, and this is a private factor. But however, the important thing here is that this choice is discouraged. This choice is restricted by the government through the education, through the tax raising, and so on. I'd like to emphasize this point in my extension. So having said that, we cannot call the smoking as valid choice that provides no harm to the society, no harm to the company. That's why we are justifiable to regulate it. Maybe not to the extension. I have three level of analysis. First of all, it's about why these people who are smoking making the valid calculus. Secondly, I'd like to engage with ICO. ICO stated the choice, importance of choice, right? Lastly, I'd like to talk about why company has the right to actively intervene. Moving on to the first level. So we believe that smoking is a valid choice. First of all, there's a numerous options for the as enjoyment. You can go to the movie, you can go to the meet with the girlfriend and so on, right? So these people who are smoking actively choose smoking as a choice from the numerous options. Secondly, as I told you before in my rebuttals, the smoking is particularly discouraged by the government as a sin of the society. For example, no. So if there are so many people who are actively smoking, the government are willing to increase the tax to provide additional incentive to have the consent whether they continue to smoke or not. We have to create an opportunity for the people to care about their health, and even though we provided some opportunity, these smokers have actively chosen to risk their life, to risk their future life, Mr. Speaker. We can say that this kind of choice is totally valid. That even though there are so many poor people who have a tendency to choose this kind of smoking, but because we introduced the tax system, because we introduced so many times to consider that we can call this is the valid calculus. So maybe that's the second analysis. So ICO just told us that if you make the decision, you choose the one type of happiness. But this means that if you choose one type of happiness, you have to give up another type of happiness, right? We cannot choose both, but that side of the house ignores that smokers are justified to take two choices, Mr. Speaker, smoking and continuous employment. So what's the point?
So the opening comments like clearly said the smoking is valid choice. On the other hand, your side said the all smoking choice is not good things or insane choice. Who is right?
So we are talking about the same thing as the opening government, right? The smoking is a valid choice, but if you choose something, you have to give up something at the same time. So I'd like to talk about later. So Aiko told us like so as I proved to you. So if you choose something, you have to give up something. For example, the same as the criminal record is currently a valid criteria for the corporation to decide whether food to be hired. For example, if you commit crime, so even though you have already demonstrated how the consequence of committing crime is severe, how you're going to be in prison, or how you're going to be hugely stigmatized by the society, how you face the difficulty to get employed again, but if these people actively chosen to do so, right? So we can say at the same time, because you choose to smoke, you have to give up another privileges. Because you seek the one privilege, that you cannot seek the two second type of privilege. This is totally unjustifiable, and so on. Moving on to the last analysis, the company has the right to choose their own criteria. Because Aiko just told us that, for example, that image is very vague. It depends on each individual. That's why the government should not blanketly ban to decide the impact of image, right? Because it depends on individual company. The company has the right to decide what kind of image is profitable for the company, what kind of image is not. The company has the directly responsibility to ensure the maximizing the happiness, Mr. Speaker, because these people are responsible towards their own co-workers, because the company is responsible for the innocent customer who wants their goods, Mr. Speaker. But what we have clearly told you is that the choice has a consequence. If you choose something, you cannot choose another thing as a privilege. We are very proud to propose.
Right, I thank the member for comment. To start the case of closing opposition, I call upon the member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The closing option will tell you three extensions which directly touches every single issue from the government. First, I'm going to tell you what's the nature of tobacco. We want to tell you that tobacco itself is controversial about the profit of the company. We had the idea from the opening option, it's vague impact. But we want to tell you from the closing option, sometimes tobacco contributes to the profit of the company. And that is a very controversial concept. Second, I'm going to tell you I'm going to tell you the underlying premise of the option case. It's about the workers' rights. Why the company should side with the workers, not with the company. We think if given that something is very controversial, we should say we should side with employee, not the company, which directly comes to the third extension from the closing comment. Third, I'm going to tell you to what extent government can intervene in the people's lifestyle. Because the closing government tried to say it is a type of discouragement of the people's lifestyle. We want to tell the closing option banks that this function is not only about discouragement, but it's at the same impact as banning these choices. We think that is extremely double standard the government would take. So first extension about the nature of tobacco. Before let me engage wipe out their second extension, right? Because their second extension is rubbish. Because like if they say if you want happiness, you should sacrifice another happiness. But they are happily concede if that factor is relevant with the company's profit, they are happy to ban this company's choices, right? That means their second extension is rubbish. So firstly, about the nature of tobacco. What we heard from the opening government banks is that tobacco is extremely vitally connected with the company's profit. There's three things. Firstly, about the image. Like image is vital. Which will say that it's rubbish, right? Because this image is not vital in the current framework. Why? Because in every single company, it's not allowed to fire tobacco. That means there's no difference about the company, right? Because every single company is hiring tobacco. That means if you want to choose, choose food about your child, you have company A and company B and company C. All of them are refused to hire. Hire tobacco. That means there's no difference about choosing what kind of company you will buy food from. That's why this image is extremely relevant thing. Second thing about they said about if it affects the insurance, which will say if that's the problem, we will say the solution should be change the system itself. If the insurance is harms their own company, that solution should be the insurance will be subsidized by the government in the first place. Because as they have considered the government is imposing a tax on tobacco, that means this tax will be distributed towards the insurance. We are happy with that. No, thank you. So let me move on to our session. We will say tobacco sometimes contributes to the war. Why is that? Because we think tobacco itself will improve the quality of life in individuals' health. Because we will suggest, during the job time, there are many stressful things, right? Because you have some conflict with a co-worker. You have some conflict with your boss. You have some quarrel, within the worker. You have plenty amount of obstacles you have to have inside the work. And tobacco provides you the vital outlet of stress. Which means if you smoke, that means if you refresh your own your entire obstacle, which will improve your efficiency of the work, right? Because if they don't have a tobacco, there's nothing easy they can take to update your stress, right? That means it is extremely difficult for them to improve their own efficiency. That's why even if these people retire earlier, because the efficiency of the work during the time will be materially improved, within sometimes this tobacco itself will contribute to the worker itself. Just as Koki refreshed their own obstacle before this round. So given that this is controversial, on the second extension, why the government should side with the worker? No, thank you. So what we have to suggest on side of the government, on side of the opposite, the workers' right should be overprotected by the company's right. Why? There are two reasons. Firstly, within there is the numbers is imbalanced, right? Because there are plenty amount of workers which will be created every year. Thousands of millions of people is becoming a new employer in a society. But the number of the company we have is extremely small. That means the company has overriding power. They can say about your worker. But secondly, we think it is a matter of the extent, Mr. Speaker. Because what we have to suggest is that the decrease of the profit of the company is not like the detrimental effect to the company, right? About the firing the 101 people. But it will affect the entire life of the individual. That means if you compare the benefit and the harm within this individual's life and the job which is directly connected to their own life, it should be protected. That's why if this is a controversial claim, within the government should side with the individual. If someone, for example, academic background, having no academic background does not mean you can have a decent work, right? If this academic background is absolutely good, within the government can allow that. But if it is something controversial to the company's profit, which is side with the company's profit.
How can you say that the nature of tobacco is so controversial when the states have been discouraging individuals to quit smoking through the advertisement or education campaign or taxation, etc.?
No, about discouragement. That's about the lifestyle, right? What we're saying is that controversial about the connection with the work, right? Efficiency of the work. That connection itself is controversial, and we are going to side with the individual. So second extent of this is that, to what extent government can intervene? We accept, Mr. Speaker, as the government said, we are discouraging people's lifestyle, right? Having a tobacco, we are imposing tax, we are banning advertisement tobacco, we are okay with that. But the distinction is that's a matter of the extent. Even if you don't see advertisement, this is about the likelihood risk, right? Even if you advertisement is banned, you can happily to choose tobacco in this framework. But what we have to suggest here is that this policy will effectively say this tobacco will never be higher in this framework. Because as I have said, there is a structural number imbalance between the workers and the employers. Employers has to give up their own smoking. You gotta compare the benefits of the job and the benefit of the tobacco, right? If there's a balance of the benefit of 300 yen of tobacco and the pleasure of the tobacco, it's comparable. But if you talk about a job which is about entirely affect your life entirely, it is not how it's not comparable. That means I'm effectively saying allows private sector to discriminate against the individual, and it is the same impact as banning this sort of thing. But second, we will tell you, it affects the social norm in your society, right? Because if you take this policy, this is the image of the company will be relevant, right? Because in their policy, there's a company which refuses a smoker. There's a company which is not refusing companies, right? That means there's a distinction about the images in their program. That means after taking this policy, at a certain point, image will affect this company's right. That means the company is more likely to fire this individual. That means individual is less likely to get job in this area. That's what impact is the same as banning this tobacco. That means the government is taking double standard for the legalizing tobacco and banning tobacco in this country. That's why this extent of the discouragement really go too far if you talk about the job which is provided to these people's side. For all these reasons, we beg to oppose. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So if we're having this debate 50 years ago, opposition would obviously win this debate. Because individuals are free from any kind of societal pressure and are able to freely smoke, being influenced by advertisement, and enjoying the cheap price of tobacco. But we're debating in 2012, where states have been discouraging individuals to smoke. And that is the clear clash from closing government to opening opposition's premise, or in fact the premise of the entire opposition, that individuals are freely choosing to smoke. But that's not the case, Mr. Speaker. And this analysis of how the states have been discouraging was never dealt with by Sino. And the only rebuttal was, like, it's controversial. Okay? I'll deal with that in my clash. So, let's talk about two things. Firstly, about effect of smoking to companies, and secondly, is smoking really a choice? But before that, I have to rebut the practical arguments, which are really unimportant, coming from the opposition, because it doesn't really fit to the clash point. So, CEO says this is equivalent to banning tobacco. No, wait. Banning tobacco, where individuals would be forced to quit smoking. If that's the case, no, thank you. We're okay. Firstly, we say, though, individuals will still be able to freely choose whether to smoke or not. And secondly, given the fact that states have been discouraging individuals to smoke, and yet they are smoking, we think that these individuals are tolerable about external pressure. Even if companies tell you to quit smoke, the fact that these individuals have been smoking, despite the fact that states have been discouraging, we think that individuals would still choose to smoke. If they don't, we're okay with that. Now, let's talk about the effect of smoking. I would have to say, no. Opening half kind of ended up with the generic arguments about companies' rights. And the first really big chunk of the opening half's debate was about the effect of smoking. Opening government started off this debate by saying that smoking and smokers has a tangible harm to companies through images, through healthcare costs, etc. And opening opposition said, well, like, it's not really big. Like Elo said, it's really vague. Mr. Speaker, we say on closing gov, those risks and effect of smoking should be decided by companies and not by the state. And we have told you, we have analyzed companies' rights a bit deeper, Mr. Speaker. Hayashi, the member of the government, said that if companies are allowed to maximize their profit, then surely they are able to have a full right to avoid any kind of risks which might affect their company's profit as well. We don't have to rely on the fact there's an empirical data that if you hire 10 smokers, your profit would be decreasing by $10 million. No, we don't have to rely on these numbers. The fact that there's a tendency and the fact that it might cause some harm is good enough reason for companies to make that a criteria, and that's why companies refuse employers based on criminal record. This was an example given by a member of the government. Not all criminals cause harm, Mr. Speaker. Pedophiles don't commit rape once again. But the fact that they might cause harm is a good enough reason for companies to reject workers. Yes, Kofi.
We've already told you that might affecting things is another thing to do, like the race or religion, or sometimes the other activities also can be affected to the company's rights. Why the only smoking itself is an exception?
Because people didn't choose their religion. People didn't choose their race. And it's extremely difficult to choose your religion. The fact that Okoki said you can opt out from religion, he's talking about only 5 or 4% of the entire really religious population. As Tominaga said in deputy speech, most of the people are baptized in like really small age, so it's hard for individuals to choose. No. Now, second clash of this debate was about choice. Whether smoking is a reflection of individuals' choice or not. And we have given you the clear reason why companies can deny employers based on their choice. Because once an individual has chosen something, that means individuals has consented to
some possible consequences, some limited choice, right? And that logic was never rebutted by CO anyway. Now, the reason why we can say that smoking is a choice is not only because they have started smoking, but because they have started smoking despite the fact of all of the environments and societal pressure around them. And this is the clear extension coming from our team. And that is that states have been discouraging individuals to smoke. We're thinking of things like taxation, where it's really expensive to buy tobacco more and more. It costs $3, $4. If you go to UK, it's more expensive. Secondly, we're talking about images on packages, where individuals are discouraged to smoke by looking at really grotesque images of lung cancer, etc. Thirdly, like education campaign. Whenever you receive healthcare education in health class, you are discouraged from smoking. Or fourthly, you can only smoke in limited places, limited areas. You can't really smoke in restaurants or in front of station, etc. Or fifthly, advertisement of tobaccos are all of these things are banned. These discouragement, what does it suggest? It suggests that despite all of these pressures, individuals has chosen to smoke. And that is why we can say that it's a choice. But not only that, secondly, it insinuates that tobacco is different from all of the examples which opening opposition talked about. Right? We're not talking about fat people. We're talking about tobacco. Governments never discourage people being fat. Government never discourage people buying McDonald's. Government does discourage individuals buying tobacco. That's the clear distinguishment. And thirdly, closing opposition said, well, these things are controversial, like it refreshes you, or it relieves your stress. But we think this analysis was a bit shallow compared to the deep analysis we have brought you, how states have been discouraging tobacco through decades, Mr. Speaker. So given the fact that tobacco states have been discouraging, we think that we can conclude that individuals has chosen to smoke. And that is the reason why, in exactly the same way, individuals chose to attend certain schools and are still discriminated in workforces, where individuals chose to commit crime and still they are jobless. It's okay, because it is the reflection of their choice. We are proud to propose.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Beck. I know this debate has been very chaotic and confused due to the tremendous repetition and the lack of engagement. Let me clarify one thing. What we have brought to the table, when the collision or relevancy between certain practices and the damage to the performance is vague and uncertain, we think companies or corporations should not be the actor to make a judgment about those habits. We think the state should be the actor to make a judgment in order to protect the rights of workers, because structurally, the relation between workers and the corporations are totally unfair. In that case, we should always protect the rights of workers. This is why we are standing on the opposition side. In order to sum up this very apocalyptic, chaotic debate, I'm going to talk about three things. One, is it valid choice or invalid choice, which directly clash with the extension from the closing government. Secondly, is smoking really damaging to the performance of the corporation? Thirdly, even if it's damaging to some extent, to what extent workers' rights should be protected? These are criteria that I'm going to talk about. Firstly, is it invalid choice or not? The extension from the closing government is very simple. Because the government has already regulated or discouraged this kind of practice of smoking, we think it is, they think it is legitimate to allow corporations to extend these kind of things. Two responses that Sano-san gave you when they failed to engage. Firstly, it's okay for the government to regulate those practices because government is democratically elected and accountable entity, ladies and gentlemen, that represent the will of the people in that nation. But we don't think private profit-seeking entity, corporation, should not make that kind of moral judgment about the societal consequence of a certain practice, ladies and gentlemen. There's a massive distinction between private entity making certain decisions or the government making decisions as a legitimate, democratic entity, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, no, thank you. This is no longer discouragement, ladies and gentlemen, because the opportunity to work and quit smoking are trade-off in particular case. For smokers, they have no other option but to quit smoking. This is not discouragement. This is buying, ladies and gentlemen. No, thank you. The response from the government whip is, even after taking proposal, people will have a choice. If they want to, they should continue. If they want to quit, they should quit. If that's the case, they can't successfully discourage smoking safely. That's a huge contradiction. We say on our side, no thank you. Moving, that's on the one side they want to emphasize discouragement, but actually it's tantamount to banning. This is huge double standard or inconsistency we say on that side of the house. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, it's smoking damaging to the performance of the it's smoking damage to the performance. Ladies and gentlemen, the entire premise on the government bench is corporations are seeking profit. If the individual harms the profit of the corporation, that choice is invalid. But this is not the case. Two reasons my partner gave you. Firstly, that smoking is massively important to relieve the stress that individuals feel, which is related to the maximization of the efficiency in the working time. We think this is a clear, tangible benefit. Short term, no thank you. But in the long term, more positively, people were able to concentrate on working in the long term if they can continuously track down their own stress. Ladies and gentlemen, this kind of tangible improvement is massively contribute to the productivity of the corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, no thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, right? Okay, I will take it from the closing side.
So if company decides this efficiency is important, the company hires them. But we're talking about the company. Do not think about this kind of efficiency is important, which is directly related to the company.
I think you are talking about the image conscious corporation or something, right? 5,000 responses. First of all, customers and consumers don't care whether workers are smoking or not. That's not important. Secondly, more extreme characteristics are often featured, such as exploitation or use of child labor. When it comes to those extreme practices, consumers start to care or consider the background of the corporation. But smoking is a really simple matter for the customers, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think those who want to buy the Kyoko Club or Tamagotchi will consider the smoking status of each workers in the public corporation. That's ridiculous analysis we see on our side. No, thank you. Finally, having proved that, it's very vague that smoking has really deleterious or pernicious effect on the productivity. When this correlation is very vague, who should be the actor to decide? No, thank you. The answer from our side is the government should be the actor to decide whether to allow individual choice to be continued or not the corporation or not the CEO of the corporation. No, thank you. There are three reasons why. Firstly, there is a structural imbalance between corporation and the workers, ladies and gentlemen. The number of corporations in this modern age is really limited. But the number of those who are seeking job, or those who are working, are really tremendous, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, because of this structural imbalance, the corporation has structurally absolute authority to oppress workers, to compel or indirectly force workers or mislead workers to certain kind of practice or habit, ladies and gentlemen. Because of this structural disparity, we think the workers' rights should be overprotected by the state. Therefore, we think the CEO of the corporation should not be the actor to decide what kind of practice or what kind of individual choice should be valid or invalid. No, thank you. Moreover, ladies and gentlemen, secondly, the extent of the harm is very different, ladies and gentlemen. The loss of productivity of a corporation is not that deleterious in comparison with the individual choice improvement of the workers, ladies and gentlemen. As the opening opposition says, that kind of habit is deeply connected to the individual way of proceeding the meaningful life, ladies and gentlemen. This kind of individual harm is much more deleterious than the small loss that corporation bears in this particular circumstance, ladies and gentlemen. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, because if the private entity sets this kind of arbitrary, subjective requirements or criteria, which will create the negative societal perception or stigmatize these people unnecessarily, ladies and gentlemen, as my partner told you, after taking proposal, some kind of game theory or normalization will occur. Because many corporations will take this kind of criteria, other corporations might be coerced or forced to take same criteria, ladies and gentlemen. This kind of arbitrary normalization, which is so pernicious or deleterious, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, as a consequence, on a conclusion, the individual right to proceed meaningful life and the small loss of the corporation are the trade-off, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think this is the equivalent trade-off. We think the rights of workers should be over-protected by the state because of the structural disparity between the corporation and the workers. That's why we are very proud to oppose the motion before the House today. Thank you.